1 week after the rescue mission, Sumi stood before the Grand Imperator and the full Tekal Council. The large meeting hall was filled with important officials from both the Tekal Empire and Earth. Captain Dojin stood beside her, his posture straight and respectful. Lady Sumi and Captain Dojin, began the Grand Imperator, his voice formal and loud. You have both shown exceptional courage in rescuing the diplomatic team from the pirate vessel. The rescue had not been easy. Sumi and Dojin had led a small team onto the pirate ship. They had worked perfectly together, Sumi using her Tekal strength when needed, Dojin using human stealth and strategy. Together, they had freed all hostages without a single loss of life. Your actions have brought honor to both our peoples, continued the Grand Imperator, and have shown us something important. Sumi looked at her father, surprised by his words. He had never spoken this way about humans before. For too long, we Tekal have believed that physical strength is the only strength that matters, said the Grand Imperator. Captain Dojin proved this wrong when he defeated my daughter in combat. Some Tekal officials shifted uncomfortably at the mention of that fight. It was still a sensitive topic. But more importantly, the Grand Imperator continued. The successful rescue mission has shown that our different strengths, when combined, can achieve more than either could alone. Dojin nodded respectfully. Sumi stood a little straighter, feeling a new kind of pride. Not pride in being superior, but pride in what they had accomplished together. Lady Sumi, said her father, turning to face her directly. You challenged a human warrior and lost more than just the fight. You lost your old way of thinking. And in doing so, you have gained wisdom. Sumi stepped forward. Father, members of the council, and representatives of Earth, my defeat by Captain Dojin taught me an important lesson. True strength comes in many forms. The Tekal are physically powerful, yes, but humans have strengths we lack. Adaptability, innovation, and the ability to turn an opponent's force against them. She looked at Dojin and smiled slightly. I have learned that we can be stronger together than apart. The Grand Imperator nodded with approval. Therefore, I am appointing Lady Sumi as our official liaison to Earth. She will work to build stronger ties between our peoples and learn more about human culture and methods. The announcement caused excited whispers throughout the hall. Such a high-ranking Tekal had never been assigned to work closely with another species before. After the ceremony, Dojin approached Sumi. Congratulations on your new position. Thank you, said Sumi. I have much to learn about Earth. And I'm sure Earth has much to learn from the Tekal, replied Dojin. Will you be visiting our planet? Yes. My father thinks it would be good for me to experience human culture firsthand. Dojin smiled. I'll be glad to show you around when you visit. 6 months later, Sumi stood in a large training hall on Earth. Before her stood 20 young Tekal and 20 young humans, all wearing similar training clothes. It was the first joint combat training program between their species. Today, she announced, you will learn from both Captain Dojin and myself. You will learn Tekal strength and human technique. You will learn when to be firm like a mountain and when to flow like water. Dojin joined her in the center of the room. Together, they demonstrated a fighting form that combined elements from both their styles. Tekal power with human redirection. The students watched in amazement as the tall blue alien and the smaller human moved in perfect harmony, each complementing the other's movements. When they finished, both Tekal and human students applauded. This, said Sumi, is the future. Not one species dominating another, but each contributing their unique strengths. As she looked at the young faces before her, blue and human skin side by side, Sumi realized how much her life had changed since that combat trial. She had challenged a human warrior and lost more than just the fight. She had lost her arrogance and found something far better: understanding, respect, and a new way forward for both their peoples. 3 days after the fight, Sumi met Dojin in a small private training room deep in the Tekal ship. She had arranged the meeting secretly, not wanting anyone to know she was seeking help from a human. You came, she said, surprised. Part of her had expected Dojin to ignore her request. Of course, said Dojin with a small bow. I'm honored you want to learn. Sumi wore simple training clothes instead of her royal armor. Dojin also wore plain exercise clothes. Without their uniforms, they seemed less like representatives of their species and more like two individuals. I want to know how you defeated me, said Sumi directly. I am stronger than you. I am faster. Yet you won. Dojin nodded. Let me show you. He began by teaching her the basic stance of Aikido. Sumi found it strange. The stance didn't look powerful or threatening. This doesn't seem useful, she complained. Try to push me over, said Dojin. Sumi pushed, expecting to send the human flying. Instead, Dojin moved slightly, redirecting her force. Sumi stumbled forward, catching herself before she fell. How did you do that? I didn't resist your strength, explained Dojin. I redirected it, like water flowing around a rock. They trained for an hour. Sumi was a quick learner, though she struggled with the concept of not using her full strength. All her life, she had been taught that power was the answer to every challenge. In Taikal combat, we meet force with greater force, she explained as they took a break. The strongest always wins. And that works well for the Taikal, said Dojin. But humans had to find another way. We aren't the strongest species on our own planet, let alone the galaxy. Then how did you survive? We adapted. We created tools. We studied our environment and learned how to use it. And we developed fighting styles that use an opponent's strength against them. Over the next few weeks, they met regularly in secret. Sumi learned more human martial arts, and Dojin learned about Taikal history and culture. They discovered they had more in common than either had expected. Your people value honor, said Dojin. So do many human cultures. Your people value strength, said Sumi. Just a different kind than we do. After one session, Sumi asked, why do you spend time teaching me? I challenged you. I insulted your species. Dojin thought for a moment. On Earth, we have a saying. The best victory is when the opponent surrenders of its own accord. I did surrender, said Sumi with a frown. I don't mean in the fight, said Dojin. I mean surrendering old ways of thinking. Learning from each other makes both of us stronger. Their conversation was interrupted by an alarm blaring throughout the ship. The emergency lights flashed red. What's happening? Asked Dojin. Sumi checked her communication device. Her eyes widened. Pirates have attacked a diplomatic vessel near us. There are both Taikal and human representatives on board. Can your ship help them? We are the closest, but most of our security forces are on shore leave at the space station. We have only a skeleton crew. They looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. We could go, said Dojin. A small team might be able to sneak aboard and free the hostages while the pirates are distracted. You and me? Asked Sumi, surprised. Working together. Why not? We each have skills the other doesn't. Together, we might succeed where either of us alone would fail. Sumi thought for a moment, then nodded. I will need to convince my father to let us try. And I'll need to inform Commander Park. They left the training room quickly, no longer princess and captain, but two warriors preparing for a mission that would test their new understanding of each other's strengths. Neither of them realized that this crisis would change the relationship between their species forever. The moment Sumi tapped the floor, the arena fell completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The Taikal princess had lost to a human. Such a thing had never happened before. The announcer cleared his throat. The winner is Captain Dojin of Earth's Defense Force. Dojin immediately released Sumi and stood up. He offered his hand to help her up, but she ignored it, rising on her own. Without looking at anyone, she walked quickly out of the arena. The Taikal crowd parted silently to let her pass. The human section erupted in cheers. Commander Park hugged Jinno, both of them jumping with excitement. Humans had never won anything against the Taikal before. The Grand Imperator sat motionless on his throne, his face unreadable. Next to him, the council representative leaned over. "Most unexpected," said the three-eyed alien, "but perhaps a good lesson for all." In her private chambers, Sumi threw her battle armor against the wall. Her body hurt, but her pride hurt more. She had lost. She, a Takal royal, had been defeated by a human. "My lady," Minji entered cautiously. "Are you okay?" "Leave me," shouted Sumi. After Minji left, Sumi sat on the edge of her bed, staring at nothing. How had this happened? The human wasn't stronger than her. He wasn't faster. But he had won. Her thoughts were interrupted when her father entered the room. The Grand Imperator rarely visited her private chambers. His face was dark with anger. "Do you realize what you've done?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Father, You have shamed our family," he continued. "You challenged a human publicly, and you lost publicly." "He cheated," Sumi said. "He didn't fight properly." "He fought smart," said her father, "which is more than I can say for you." The Grand Imperator walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "For generations, we Takal have believed we are superior because of our strength. Today, a human proved that strength alone is not enough." "What will happen now?" asked Sumi quietly. "Now, you will stay out of sight until this embarrassment passes." When he left, Sumi felt more alone than ever before. In the Earth delegation's quarters, Dojin sat as a doctor treated his injuries. He had cuts and bruises all over his body. One eye was swollen, and he would have several impressive bruises tomorrow. "You'll live," said the doctor with a smile. "Though I'm surprised you're still in one piece." Commander Park entered, grinning widely. "The hero of the hour. The human delegates can't stop talking about it. You've become famous overnight." Dojin didn't smile back. "Is that a good thing?" "Of course it is. You showed everyone that humans aren't to be underestimated." Jinho joined them, carrying a small box. "This just arrived for you, Dojin." Inside the box was a formal note, written in perfect human language. "Captain Dojin, I congratulate you on your victory. You fought with honor and skill. If it pleases you, I would like to learn more about human fighting techniques. Lady Sumi." Dojin read the note twice, surprised. "Did anyone see who delivered this?" "A Takal servant," said Jinho. "She left quickly." That evening, Dojin wrote a reply. "Lady Sumi, thank you for the opportunity to demonstrate human martial arts. I would be honored to share our techniques with you. In your culture, strength is valued. In mine, we learned that true strength comes in many forms. I hope we can learn from each other. Captain Dojin." As he sealed the note, Dojin wondered if she would actually read it. The Takal were proud, and Sumi was prouder than most. But she had surprised him with her note. Perhaps there was more to her than he had seen. The next morning, Minji delivered Dojin's reply to Sumi, who was still hiding in her chambers. Sumi read it slowly. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to tear up the note, but something in the human's words made her pause. True strength comes in many forms. What did that mean? And why did she suddenly want to know? Sumi got to her feet slowly. Her body hurt in places that had never hurt before. The arena remained quiet as she faced the human again. "Lucky throw," she said, trying to sound confident. "Not luck," replied Dojin. "Technique." Anger replaced Sumi's fear. She would not be defeated by this small human. She was a Takal royal. She was superior. She attacked again, but more carefully this time. She threw quick jabs instead of powerful punches. Dojin blocked most of them, but some connected with his chest and arms. Each hit made him step back, and Sumi pressed her advantage. The Takal crowd began to cheer again. This looked more like the fight they had expected. The powerful Takal pushing the human back, landing blow after blow. "It seems your captain's trick only worked once," the Grand Imperator said to Commander Park. "The fight isn't over yet," she replied quietly. In the arena, Dojin was taking hits, Blood ran from a cut above his eye. His breathing was heavy, but strangely, he didn't look worried. Sumi felt her confidence return. She had the human on the defensive now. She just needed to keep hitting him until he fell. No human could take this kind of punishment for long. But as the fight continued, Sumi noticed something odd. While she was landing more hits, she was also getting more tired. Each attack took energy, and the human wasn't making it easy. He moved constantly, making her chase him around the arena. Meanwhile, when Dojin did attack, his strikes were precise and efficient. He wasted no movement, no energy. He targeted the same spots on her body repeatedly. Her joints, her pressure points. What is happening? General Ryu asked no one in particular. Why doesn't she just finish him? Jinho smiled slightly. Because she can't, he said. Dojin isn't trying to match her strength. He's draining it. As the fight continued into its 10th minute, the difference in their strategies became clear. Sumi's movements were slowing. Her breathing was heavy. Sweat poured down her blue skin. Dojin was also tired and hurt, but he maintained his form. He had trained for this, for endurance, for precision, for fighting smarter rather than stronger. He's wearing her down, whispered Minji from her place among the servants. Sumi realized it too. She needed to end this now before she lost more energy. With a final burst of speed, she charged at Dojin, both arms extended to grab him. Dojin stepped in to meet her charge. As her arms wrapped around him, he dropped his weight and twisted. Suddenly, Sumi found herself off balance. In one smooth motion, Dojin hooked his leg behind hers and pushed forward with his shoulder. Sumi fell backwards with the human on top of her. Before she could push him off, Dojin had moved to her side. His arm snaked under her neck, while his legs locked around her arm and body. It was a human submission hold, a chokehold. Sumi tried to break free, but she couldn't. She was stronger than Dojin, but the hold used leverage, not strength. The more she struggled, the tighter it became. "Submit," said Dojin quietly. "I don't want to hurt you." "Never," gasped Sumi, still struggling. Her vision began to blur as the hold restricted blood flow to her brain. She tried to roll, to use her weight, but Dojin adjusted with each movement, maintaining the hold. The arena was completely silent. Everyone watched as the Takal princess struggled against the human lock. No one had expected this. No one had thought it possible. "Submit," Dojin said again. "There's no shame in it." Sumi felt her strength fading. For the first time in her life, she faced a choice: submit or pass out. Neither option had ever been presented to her before. With the last of her energy, she tapped her hand against the arena floor 3 times. The signal of submission. The fight was over. The human had won. Dojin flew backward from the force of Sumi's punch. He hit the ground hard and rolled several times before stopping. The Takal crowd roared with approval. "That's more like it," shouted General Ryu from the stands. Sumi smiled and raised her fist to the crowd. She turned to look at Dojin, expecting to see him still on the ground, maybe even crying for mercy. Instead, the human was already getting up. He wiped a small trickle of blood from his mouth and took his fighting stance again. "Lucky hit," he said with a small smile. Sumi frowned. Why wasn't he afraid? She rushed at him again, throwing a series of punches. Dojin dodged most of them, but one caught his shoulder, making him stumble. The human section of the crowd watched nervously. Commander Park covered her eyes, then peeked through her fingers. "Is this how all combat trials go?" asked the 3-eyed council representative. "Usually they end much faster," replied the Grand Imperator. "When 2 Takal fight, one quickly proves stronger." Back in the arena, Sumi was getting frustrated. Yes, she had landed some hits, but the human kept getting up. Worse, he seemed to be watching her, studying her movements. "Stop dancing around," she shouted, charging again. This time, when she swung, Dojin didn't just dodge. He grabbed her arm and used her own momentum to pull her forward. Suddenly, Sumi found herself flying through the air, flipped completely over. She landed hard on her back. The arena went silent. Sumi got up quickly, shocked. How had the small human done that? She hadn't lost her balance in a fight since she was a child. What was that? She demanded. Aikido, replied Dojin calmly. A human martial art. It uses an opponent's strength against them. Sumi's yellow eyes narrowed. She attacked again, more carefully this time. Dojin blocked her strikes, redirecting her force rather than meeting it directly. When she pushed, he pulled. When she pulled, he pushed. The fight continued, with Sumi growing more and more frustrated. She was stronger, faster, and should be winning easily. Yet the human kept evading her best attacks, and sometimes even turned her strength against her. Sweat began to form on Sumi's blue skin. She was breathing heavily now. The human was also tired, with bruises showing on his face and arms, but he maintained his calm focus. He's wearing her down, Jinho said quietly in the human section. Commander Park nodded. But can he last long enough? One solid hit could end this. Sumi wiped sweat from her eyes and tried to think. This wasn't working. The human wasn't fighting properly. In a real Taikal combat trial, fighters met strength with strength. They didn't dance around like this. She decided to use her full power. No more holding back. No more playing nice. With a roar, Sumi charged at Dojin with all her speed. Her fist glowed slightly blue, a sign that she was using her full Taikal strength. The human crowd gasped. Such a blow could seriously injure Captain Dojin. But instead of dodging, this time Dojin stepped toward Sumi. As her punch came in, he moved slightly to the side and grabbed her arm. Using her own momentum and a careful shift of his weight, he executed a perfect throw. Sumi, moving at full speed, was lifted off her feet. The world spun around her as she flipped through the air. She crashed down onto the arena floor with tremendous force. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Pain shot through her body. Never in her life had she been thrown down so hard. When her vision cleared, Dojin stood over her, still in his fighting stance, ready if she got up. The arena was completely silent. A Taikal royal had been thrown to the ground by a human, something no one had thought possible. For the first time in her life, Sumi felt something new, doubt, and even more surprising, fear. The combat arena was a large circular space in the center of the Taikal flagship. Metal walls rose high around it, with rows of seats for spectators. The floor was covered with a special material that was firm, but had some give to it. By mid-morning, every seat was filled. Taikal nobles sat in the front rows. Representatives from other alien species filled the middle sections. The small human delegation was given a space near the top, far from the action. The Grand Imperator himself sat on a raised platform. Though he didn't approve of his daughter's challenge, tradition required him to watch. Next to him sat the three-eyed Galactic Council representative, looking nervous. "This is highly unusual," the council representative said to the Grand Imperator. "A combat trial between different species has not happened in over 50 cycles. My daughter can be stubborn," the Grand Imperator replied. But the human accepted. "We must honor the challenge." A horn sounded, and the crowd grew quiet. A tall Taikal in formal robes stepped into the center of the arena. "Today we witness a combat trial between Lady Sumi, daughter of the Grand Imperator of the Taikal Empire, and Captain Dojin of Earth's Defense Force," he announced. "The trial will end when one fighter submits or is unable to continue." Another horn sounded. From one side of the arena, a door opened and Sumi entered. She wore traditional Taikal battle armor, colored bright blue to match her skin. The armor was light and flexible, covering her chest, arms, and legs. Her head remained bare, showing her pride. The Taikal crowd cheered loudly. Sumi raised her arms, soaking in their support. She looked confident, almost bored, as if this fight was just a small task to complete before lunch. From the opposite side, Captain Dojin entered. He wore a simple black uniform with the Earth Defense Force symbol on the chest. Unlike Sumi's flashy entrance, he walked calmly to the center of the arena. His face showed focus, not fear. The human section gave polite applause. The rest of the crowd watched in curious silence. When both fighters stood in the center, facing each other, the size difference was clear. Sumi was 2 feet taller than Dojin, and much broader in the shoulders. Her blue skin seemed to shine with power next to his plain human appearance. These combat trials usually happen between tackle, the announcer explained. But the rules are simple. No weapons, no serious injuries, victory by submission or knockout. Sumi looked down at Dojin. You can still back out, human, she said quietly. Say you're sick. I'll let you save face. Thank you for your concern, Dojin replied calmly. But I gave my word. Then, to everyone's surprise, he bowed deeply to her. This was not a tackle custom. The crowd murmured, confused. Sumi frowned. What are you doing? Showing respect to my opponent, said Dojin. It's a human tradition before combat. Respect. Sumi laughed. Save it for someone who might lose. The announcer stepped back. Fighters ready. Sumi nodded, taking a wide stance with her arms ready. Dojin also nodded, settling into a stance that was unfamiliar to the watching tackle. His feet were placed carefully, his hands held loose but ready. Begin. Sumi didn't waste time. She rushed forward with incredible speed, swinging her right fist in a powerful arc aimed at Dojin's head. The crowd gasped. Such a blow could seriously hurt a human. But Dojin wasn't there. He had shifted slightly, just enough for her fist to miss by inches. Before Sumi could react, he had stepped to the side. Surprised, Sumi turned and charged again. This time, she used both hands, trying to grab the human. Again, Dojin moved at the last second, his movements precise and economical. Stand still and fight. Sumi growled, frustrated. I am fighting, Dojin replied calmly. The crowd watched in confusion. This was not how tackle fought. Where was the clash of strength against strength? The human was just moving. Sumi's yellow eyes narrowed. She took a deep breath and focused. Then she charged again. Faster than before, her fist aimed directly at Dojin's chest. This time, she connected. Sumi swung her fist at the training dummy. The impact made a loud sound and sent the dummy flying across the room. She smiled, pleased with her strength. Bring me another, she ordered. Minji hurried to set up a new training dummy. The training room was large and filled with various exercise equipment designed for the tackle. Sumi had been there for only 30 minutes, yet 5 broken dummies lay scattered on the floor. The human will break just like these dummies, Sumi said. I will barely need to try. Minji nodded but looked worried. My lady, I heard the human has been training for many hours each day since the challenge. Sumi laughed. Let him train. It won't help. No amount of training can make up for what humans lack. She punched the new dummy, breaking it with one blow. In her mind, the dummy wore Captain Dojin's face. When I defeat him, everyone will remember that the tackle are superior, she said. It will be a good lesson for all humans. Meanwhile, in a much smaller room provided to the Earth delegation, Captain Dojin was also training. His friend and fellow officer, Jinno, watched him from the side. Dojin moved slowly through a series of fighting stances. Each movement was precise and fluid. Then he picked up speed, his hands and feet becoming a blur as he practiced strikes, blocks, and kicks. You've been at this for 4 hours today, said Jinno, and the same yesterday. Do you really think you can win against her? Dojin stopped and wiped sweat from his face with a towel. Winning can mean different things, Jinno. She's twice your strength, Dojin. Everyone knows the tackle are physically superior. Dojin took a drink of water and sat down next to his friend. My grandfather used to say that strength without skill is just wasted power. Your grandfather wasn't fighting aliens. Dojin smiled. No, but he was a champion fighter back on Earth. 5 generations of my family have practiced martial arts. My father taught me that when facing a stronger opponent, you must use their strength against them. He stood up and moved to the center of the room again. The Takel rely on their natural advantages. They don't think they need strategy or technique. That's their weakness. And if that's not enough, asked Jinho. Then I lose with honor, said Dojin simply. But I show up. I fight. I don't give up. That alone will surprise them. Jinho shook his head but smiled. You always were stubborn. As the days passed, word of the upcoming combat trial spread through the ship. Many Takel came to watch Sumi train, cheering as she broke equipment and boasting about how quickly she would defeat the human. No one came to watch Dojin train except his fellow humans. He didn't mind. He preferred the quiet. At night, Dojin would review videos of Takel fighting techniques. He noticed patterns in their movements, their tendency to rely on direct attacks rather than redirection or evasion. They fought like people who had never needed to fear getting hit. On the night before the combat trial, Sumi barely trained at all. She attended a feast in her honor, where Takel nobles toasted to her upcoming victory. The human won't last 1 minute against you, said General Ryu, raising his glass. I might let him last 2 minutes, said Sumi, to make it interesting for the audience. Everyone laughed. No one doubted she would win. That same night, Dojin sat alone in his room, eyes closed in meditation. In his mind, he went through every move he might need, every strategy that might work. He knew most people expected him to lose badly. But Captain Dojin had spent his life defying expectations. Morning came. The day of the combat trial had arrived. Throughout the ship, excitement grew. No one wanted to miss the fight between the Takel princess and the human captain. It was time to see which one of them had been right all along. Sumi stepped forward, her blue skin gleaming under the bright lights of the reception hall. The crowd grew quiet as she moved toward Captain Dojin. Even among the Takel, the royal family commanded special attention. When Sumi spoke, everyone listened. Captain Dojin, she said, her voice clear and loud. Your words are interesting, but I wonder if humans truly understand their place in the galaxy. The human captain turned to face her fully. His eyes were calm, showing neither fear nor anger. And what place would that be, Lady Sumi? He asked. Several Takel nobles chuckled. General Ryu smiled widely, enjoying the scene. Below the Takel, of course, said Sumi. As are all species. The other alien representatives at the reception shifted uncomfortably. The Takel were not known for their modesty. I see, said Dojin simply. Is that why your people have welcomed Earth into the galactic community? To remind us of our place. Sumi felt her anger rise. This human was too calm, too sure of himself. Perhaps you need a more direct lesson, she said. I challenge you to combat trial. This is the Takel way of settling matters of honor. A gasp went through the crowd. Combat trials were serious matters in Takel culture. For the daughter of the Grand Imperator to challenge a foreign representative was almost unheard of. An older human woman stepped forward from the Earth delegation. Captain, this is not necessary. I accept, said Dojin, cutting her off. Now it was Sumi's turn to be surprised. She had expected him to refuse, to make excuses. The fact that he accepted so quickly bothered her. A tall alien with gray skin and 3 eyes moved between them. He wore the formal robes of the Galactic Council. If this combat trial is to proceed, said the council representative, it must be understood by all parties that this is a ceremonial contest only. No matter the outcome, there will be no diplomatic consequences. Agreed, said Dojin. Of course, said Sumi, though she was already thinking of how the humans' defeat would prove Takel's superiority. The news of the challenge spread quickly through the ship. When the reception ended, Sumi was called to her father's private chambers. The Grand Imperator was not pleased. What were you thinking? He asked. His voice was low but full of anger. To challenge a representative of a new species at their welcoming ceremony. Father, the human was disrespectful. He acts as if they are our equals. And so you will fight him. What if you lose? Sumi laughed. Lose? To a human? Have you seen them? They are half our size, with half our strength. The Grand Imperator stood from his throne and walked to his daughter. Though old, he was still an impressive figure, towering over her. Pride has been the downfall of many great warriors. Sumi, do not underestimate these humans. Our reports say they are resourceful. I will not embarrass our family, Father. I promise you that. In another part of the ship, Captain Dojin was having a similar conversation with his superior officers. Was that wise, Captain? Asked Commander Park. The Takal are physically superior to humans in every way. Maybe so, said Dojin, but this isn't just about winning a fight. What is it about then? Asked another officer. Respect, said Dojin simply. If I had refused her challenge, the Takal would see it as proof of human weakness. By accepting, I've already surprised them. Commander Park sighed. The Council will not be happy. This could affect Earth's standing if you're badly defeated. Dojin smiled slightly. Then I'll try not to be badly defeated. The news spread beyond the ship, reaching other alien species in the sector. Many were curious to see a human face a Takal in combat. Some made bets, nearly all favoring the alien princess. A few, however, wondered if the humans might have some trick up their sleeves. After all, they had survived on their planet despite being physically weaker than many Earth predators. The combat trial was set for 3 days later. Sumi was confident. Dojin was prepared. Neither knew that this fight would change both their lives forever. Lady Sumi stood by the large window of the Imperial ship. Stars stretched out before her like tiny lights on a black cloth. She sighed and tapped her long blue fingers on the edge of the window. Another boring day in the life of the daughter of the Grand Imperator of the Takal Empire. The ship was huge, with shining floors and tall ceilings. Guards in bright armor stood at every door. Servants rushed to meet any need she might have. And yet, Sumi felt trapped. My lady, your father asks for your presence at the meeting hall, said a small voice behind her. Sumi turned to see her handmaiden Minji bowing deeply. Unlike Sumi, who stood 7 feet tall with blue skin that shimmered like water, Minji was smaller, with skin that was more green than blue. All Takal looked similar, but the royal family had the brightest blue color, showing their pure blood. Another meeting. What for this time? Asked Sumi. Her voice was deep and clear. The humans, my lady. They have joined the galactic community. Your father is hosting their representatives today. Sumi's bright yellow eyes widened. The humans. She had heard of them. A strange species from a small planet called Earth. They had been discovered only 20 years ago, and now they were finally ready to join the wider galaxy. How exciting, said Sumi, not meaning it. Another weak species for us to protect. The Takal Empire ruled over many worlds. They were the strongest, the fastest, and the smartest beings in the known galaxy. At least that's what Sumi had been taught since birth. 2 hours later, Sumi stood beside her father's great throne in the meeting hall. The room was filled with important Takal nobles and visitors from other alien races. Then the doors opened, and the human delegation walked in. Sumi was surprised. The humans were small, only about 5 or 6 feet tall. Their skin was various shades of pink, brown, and tan, with no blue at all. They looked soft and weak. One human stepped forward, a male with dark hair and serious eyes. He wore a crisp uniform with badges that must show his rank. Grand Imperator, I am Captain Dojin of Earth's Defense Force. I bring greetings from Earth and thanks for welcoming us to the galactic community. His voice was steady, and he spoke the Takal language well. Sumi's father nodded with approval. Later, at the reception, Sumi watched the humans closely. They seemed to be trying hard to be polite, even when the Takal nobles weren't always kind in return. Is it true that humans can't even lift twice their own weight? Asked General Rio, one of the highest Takal military officers. He was speaking to Captain Dojin, while several nobles listened and smiled. "That's correct, General," said Dojin calmly. "And your bones break so easily. How do you survive as a species?" The general laughed, and others joined him. Sumi expected the human to get angry or look ashamed. Instead, Captain Dojin smiled slightly. "We adapt, General. What we lack in strength, we make up for in other ways." "Like what?" asked Sumi, stepping closer. All eyes turned to her. Captain Dojin looked at her directly. No fear showed in his face, which surprised her. Most beings feared the Takel, especially the royal family. Innovation, strategy, endurance. We find a way to succeed, even when others think we can't. General Ryu laughed again, louder. "Fine words. But words don't win battles or build empires." Something about the human's calm confidence bothered Sumi deeply. The Takel were superior in every way. This was a fact, not something to be questioned. Yet this small human stood there, unafraid, almost suggesting that humans might be equal to Takel. It was then that Sumi made a decision. She would show everyone just how weak humans truly were, and she knew exactly how to do it.